let's talk about the deployment of National Guard troops into cities, okay? The U.S. Constitution specifies 3 different circumstances in which the National Guard can be federalized, that is taken over by the federal government, because the National Guard is the militia. The term in the Constitution is militia. The Constitution specifies 3 circumstances in which Congress may authorize the president to call up or call forth, is the language that the Constitution uses, to call forth the militia. One is in case of invasion. A second is in a case of insurrection. And the third situation is to enforce federal law, not state law, to enforce federal law. And Congress has authorized the president to call forth the militia to enforce federal law when the normal methods of enforcing federal law have proven inadequate. So you've got 2 different cases that recently came out, one from California, one from Oregon. In California, the court determined that President Trump did have authority to call forth the National Guard because the local federal police who protect the federal buildings were overwhelmed. In Oregon, however, the court determined there was no such crisis. And it is beyond the power of the president to simply call up the National Guard to do routine police work.
Is the United States Constitution still holding up? How much longer does it have? We're going to find out. But first, subscribe and like our channel. Click that little bell icon for notifications. And find the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite listening app. The one, the only Rob Natelson, the guy who knows more about the Constitution than the guys who wrote it. You've written 4 versions of this book. Why?
Well, first, John, thank you for having me on, my favorite show. Love being on. 4 editions because we're always learning new things. The original Constitution doesn't change, but sometimes our reconstruction of what the founders meant does change.
The book is called The Original Constitution.
Yeah,
so
right.
Now the original Constitution has changed.
The original Constitution is in the book, but the original Constitution is not the entire book.
You changed the book, and the book is called Original Constitution.
Yeah.
Therefore, the original Constitution has
Read
changed.
the subtitle there.
There's a who's on first problem here.
That's right.
The historical meaning of America's supreme law. All right, I love talking about this. In this book, the Constitution takes up like 16 pages. Yeah. That's it. Our operating system, the DOS OS for people old enough, is a really small document. How can that manage a bureaucracy as large as 25% of the economy?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, one of the reasons why the federal government is so dysfunctional today is that it's trying to do all these sorts of things it was never designed to do.
Like what?
Well, like, for example, run the healthcare system. I mean, that was not in the minds of the founders when they wrote the Constitution, and in fact, they excluded that sort of micromanaging of the economy. What has happened is that you've got an organization, the presidency, Congress, the Supreme Court, that's supposed to be managing a much smaller entity trying to manage the entire economy.
Let's go back to the beginning. I think people forget, or maybe weren't taught, that the federal government was created by the states. Mm-hmm. This entity that now runs roughshod over the states was created by the states to be a co-equal partner in governance, wasn't it? Was that the federal government wasn't supposed to be bigger, badder, larger. It just did a different thing than what the state of Colorado or the state of any place does. Was that how it was designed?
The answer may surprise you, and in fact, it's addressed in the book. The federal government was not actually created by the states. The people created the states initially, and then the people also created the federal government, and they allocated powers between the states and the federal government. What they did, in the words of the late Justice Kennedy, is they split the atoms of sovereignty. Previous to that time, it had always been viewed that sovereignty must always be in one place. In the Constitution, the people said, for certain enumerated purposes, we're going to locate sovereignty in the federal government.
Give me a definition
In
of
other-
sovereignty.
Supreme governmental power. In other circumstances, we'll lodge it in the states. But they were designed to be coordinate branches of government. And you're right, the federal government has gone far beyond its appropriate scope and does push the states around.
So when I said the states created the federal government, you corrected me and said, oh, no, the people.
It was the people, yeah.
How? I mean, help me with that, because it sure looked to me, when I look at the big painting, that you had representatives representing the states who were there. Are you arguing that since they were elected representatives of the states, those were the people?
The event that legitimized the Constitution was not the drafting convention, okay? The actual event was the ratification. The ratification by popularly elected representatives in the 13 states. In fact, the system was set up in such a way as to assure that when the states did ratify, that the Constitution would come into effect only if it represented not only the views of 9 states, but specifically the views of a majority of the American people. That's the way the ratification process was set up. The Constitution starts with the words, "we the people," because that was the traditional position for the grantor in a charter. In other words, if you had a royal charter, it would start off with the name of the king who gave the power.
So
in the same
King
way,
George
we the
thought
people, right?
Okay.
Georgius Rex III, In the same way, we the people represents the granting group, and that actual grant occurred during the ratification process.
You said something that it had to be ratified by 9 states, but also by a majority of the people.
Yeah, this is a subtle aspect that most people haven't caught.
So if you had 9 states that had 3 people each in them, and all the population left over, the millions were in those 3 states that said no, 4 states that said no, would it still be ratified?
Well, look, the way the ratification procedure was set up, and one reason it was set at 9 states, was that there was no combination of 9 states that would represent less than a majority of the American people. Okay. At the very least, it would be a bare majority of the American people.
Did any states vote against it?
Initially, yes. Rhode Island, instead of holding a ratification convention, the Rhode Island legislature set the matter to the people for a referendum, and they voted it down.
Really?
Yeah. And then previous to that, in in North Carolina, it was also a ratification convention. They didn't exactly reject the Constitution. They simply adjourned without having ratified it. And so in both states, they had to do the process over again. North Carolina held a later convention, which ratified the Constitution. And the Rhode Island legislature begrudgingly said, well, I guess we'll have a popularly elected convention instead of a referendum. And the popularly elected convention ratified the Constitution.
And if they didn't, it wouldn't have mattered, would it? Because they were outvoted.
I don't understand the question.
So if both of those states didn't end up ratifying that?
No, the Constitution specified that it would be valid only as to those states that ratified. So not only did they want a majority of the American people, they did not want to force any state in against the will of the majority of the people of that state.
All right, so let me see if I got this one right, because this is new information for me. Let's just keep with Rhode Island. If Rhode Island rejected it, and then they tried again and rejected it again, Rhode Island would be a little country unto itself?
That's right. And in fact, Rhode Island was a country unto itself.
It still is, but yes.
There were several states that were independent countries for a while. So the 11 states ratified by the spring of 1789, and the federal government gets started, but with only those 11 states. So North Carolina is now an independent country. Last year, I spent some time going through the records of North Carolina, legislative records from that period of time when they were independent. And they actually made changes in the records to indicate that they were no longer part of the United States. Rhode Island did the same. So Rhode Island was an independent country for a while. And then shortly after that, a 14th state ratified. And that was a state that had been an independent country for 14 years. So, John, what do you think that independent country was for 14 years?
I'm thinking it's Texas.
It would be Vermont.
Vermont was its own country
yeah.
for
Vermont, the Republic of Vermont was established.
Live Free or Die? No, that's New Hampshire.
That's New Hampshire. Republic of Vermont was established in 1777. And for various reasons, they did not join the United States under the Articles of Confederation. But finally, in January of 1791, they joined the United States and became the 14th state.
I had no idea. All right, so when other states joined, did those elected bodies in the states also have to ratify the Constitution? As we're going to celebrate 250 years of the country, there's going to be 150th anniversary of the state of Colorado. I know that Congress had to ratify Colorado being a state. Did Coloradans have to?
Well, no, but to go back to the founding era, once the popularly elected convention chose to adopt the Constitution,
right,
then the legislature didn't have the ability to veto that. The legislature of that state had to go ahead and make the necessary arrangements to join the Union.
Latter states.
Yes.
Yeah. So in order. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So Colorado never ratified the United States Constitution. We just joined up.
Actually, we did ratify by joining up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how did we join up? In other words, what was the process? I know that a lot of Colorado was either Kansas or Nebraska territory, and then someone said, hey, let's have our own state. Congress has to do it. Does the president have to sign it?
Yeah, you're right. Colorado was divided up. I mean, part of it was Utah, part of it was Nebraska, part was Kansas. If you ever go up to Boulder, you've been there, I know.
Sadly, too often.
There's a road there called Baseline Road.
Right.
It's called Baseline Road because it's the territorial baseline for most of the state of Colorado. It's the exact 40th parallel. It's also the former border between Nebraska territory and Kansas territory.
You're kidding.
Yeah, yeah. And so everything east of the Continental Divide and south of Baseline Road, such as where we're sitting right now, was Kansas. And in fact, this happened to be Montana County, Kansas. Montana County, that's where we sit right now. Anyway, finally, it was Congress that decided to assemble the territory of Colorado. Colorado applied, I believe, on 2 prior occasions for admission to the Union after holding constitutional conventions, was turned down by Congress, and then finally, as you know,
when you say Colorado applied or Colorado tried, who?
The territory of Colorado.
All right, so there was, even though we were in a couple different states, there was still a territory.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a state and a territory?
In other words, Colorado was split up into different territories, into Utah and Nebraska and Kansas. Congress then passed a bill that created the Colorado Territory with the current boundaries. Okay,
right.
And it was the people of Colorado Territory who twice requested admission to the Union as a state and were turned down. I think in one instance the president vetoed it.
Obama used to make the mistake of saying there are 57 states, and I think he meant 50 states and some territories. Isn't that what? So what exactly is a territory? What we've got Puerto Rico. What is that a territory?
Yeah,
is that
it's a territory. It's a territory.
What is it? What is it?
It's a part of the United States that's not within a state, essentially. So Puerto Rico is one example. I think there are 5 inhabited ones now. Puerto Rico and Guam and the Mariana Islands and a few others.
I know a lot of people want to live in Puerto Rico, no income tax.
Right. They also don't get to vote for president because they're a territory, or as Congress has called them, a commonwealth.
I have this dream. It's a silly dream. And my silly dream is, do you remember when Weld County and a few others were saying, we want to be the 51st state?
Yeah,
Everybody
right.
laughed at them, except people there were like, we got to get out of this. We got to get out of Colorado. Colorado's gone too crazy. And then I thought, you know what would be even better? Why don't we just move the border of Wyoming to grab Weld County and a few other counties that want to be a lifeboat? Therefore they can have oil and gas production again, but you can live in Wyoming, be free, but still use DIA as an airport when you needed to. And I thought about it. It's like, well, you'd have to get Congress to agree. You'd have to get Colorado to agree. You'd have to get Wyoming to agree. And you'd have to get Colorado voters to agree, because I believe our borders are actually in the Constitution of Colorado,
Yeah, they are.
which is very rare. I don't think most states have that.
Most constitutions from that time do have it.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually had a different solution about the same time Weld County was looking to secede, and that was that Colorado keep her current borders, but simply evict Denver and Boulder.
A little island nation of
So,
Denver.
Right. They could form their own little socialist
They
social
have.
republic. Right.
They have. It's
Right.
just that
But they would no longer be part of Colorado, and they would no longer be overriding the rest of the
Or
state.
at least, to be honest about it, it could be the state of Boulder, Denver, and the rest of the state could be a territory of the state of Boulder, Denver. Because we have no voting rights anyway.
Or Colorado could remain a state, have 2 senators, and Boulder, Denver could be a territory of Colorado. The problem, however, you have identified was that you have to have the consent of these multiple bodies. Any one of them has a veto.
Didn't the same thing happen with Michigan? Didn't Michigan change its state borders for those weird islands up above that it was part
That
of
I don't
Minnesota?
know. That I don't recall.
All right, but so the only way out is through a civil war. Is that what you're telling me?
No, you'd have to
This is your
get
call.
approval somehow.
This is your call to arms.
What you do is you establish a big federal grant program, and you give money to the people of the right?
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.